Again, thank you all for joining us, and we'll turn it over to Beth, Diane and Beth.
So thank you, Jennifer, and thank you all for being with us tonight. We hear there's some bad weather across the state. I am Diane Mack, and I'm here working out of Manhattan. And so we have over 270 participants that registered for this series, and we are so excited about that because our judging process at county fairs is so important. And tonight, we're going to focus on the judging aspect of it, and then for the next two series, we will focus on specifically next week on judging foods, and the next week will be on judging foods preservation. And Karen Blakesley will be leading us through those two. And so I just wanted to again say that we have folks from Atchison County clear down to Morton County. We have folks from Cherokee County and over to Rawlins County. We also have some visitors from different states. So we have new folks that are new to judging. We have folks that have lots of experience in judging. We have 4-H members, we have superintendents, we have project leaders, and we have parents who are attending. So thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us and being a part of this process. Beth, I think you were going to share a little bit about using the Zoom features with us tonight. We'll get the hang of everything here with the technology, so. There you go, Beth.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You know, as Jennifer said, we are trying to stay muted for the most part tonight. And so she had me muted, which is certainly appropriate. So a couple of things about Zoom. If you have never used it before, it's a little different if you're on a computer versus on a tablet versus on a phone. But somewhere you would see your microphone and your video. Certainly Jennifer has those turned off for most of us for the evening, and that's just really about the bandwidth. But those are important things to know if you ever Zoom again. You should see somewhere where you see the number of participants. We're up to 177 that have logged on now. You'll also see chat, and you can send a chat to everyone or specific people, but as we go along and as you have questions, if you would put those in the chat, that way we can go back to them and get them answered at that point in time. If there are any questions that you have about Zoom, you could put those in the chat as well, and Jennifer's going to be trying to keep an eye on those. But really, I think those are the most important things that you need to know about Zoom. If the one other thing I would say is if you go to the participant list and find yourself on participant, if you hover over yourself on that list, you'll see something probably that says more, and you could change your name there if you want to. So if you logged in with somebody else's computer, or it looks weird how you've logged in and you want to change that, you certainly can, because that's what will show up on your chat message as well. So again, welcome. It's wonderful to have everybody here this evening.
Thank you, Beth, for those helpful tips. And what we will be doing, unless it's a question about Zoom, we will wait for questions at the end of our presentation. We just think that'll be the easiest way to handle those. And again, Jennifer will be watching. So Jennifer, the first thing that we want to do is to actually do a little poll. And so Jennifer, if you'll go ahead and cue that. What I would like to know is, have you personally ever had an item judged at a fair? So you could answer yes or no, and that could be that you're as a 4-H member, or as in open class. So you can just click on yes or no, and then at the bottom you hit submit. So if everybody would go ahead and do our poll for us. Give you a couple minutes to find that. Jennifer, if you could let me know that there's a large amount that have responded, and then we can share those results.
Yep, we're at 91%. So I'll go ahead and end polling, and then we'll share results.
Okay, so we can see that 85% of those who are on that answered the poll have had an item judged, and that 15% have not. So thank you for taking a part of our poll. But what I wanted to stress here before we get started is that when a 4-H member or an adult, if you enter open class, is that you are asking someone to critique your exhibit. So that's an important piece to know, and to help 4-Hers understand that when you enter an item, it will be judged. And the important thing for tonight, and we work through these series, is that the judge's opinion will be based on the safety recommendations and those things that through our K-State Research and Extension Specialist, Karen Blakeslee, when we work through that. So what are some of our objectives for this evening of this training session? So each night that we do this, so next week and the week after, we'll have different objectives. But tonight, we're really working on understanding your role as a judge in creating a positive learning experience for you. And that we understand that youth development is the main focus of what we do in 4-H. Not so much about the exhibit, but exhibiting is important. And we want you to help you understand the ribbon rating system that we do use. So what are the objectives for our young people as they participate in a county fair? We know that the 4-H year starts in October, and so all these learning experiences are happening during the year, and then it comes to the county fair, which is our showcase or a culminating event. But so they have been learning through the experiential learning model. That's how we teach in 4-H. So they do it, they reflect upon it, and then apply what they've learned. So one of the most important aspects of a young person competing in the fair is to gain that knowledge and support and encouragement. They're there to learn new and better methods. And so as a judge, you are there to share those things with them. They're going to compare their work with a standard. And we're going to talk a little bit later more about standards and what we mean by that. And we want to provide youth an opportunity to share what they have learned and accomplished with the 4-H audience, and of course with the public at that county fair, and to promote 4-H youth development. So first of all, we always want to remember that we're trying to create that positive experience as we think about our county fairs and your role as a judge. So you're part of that team that helps to connect that project learning experience with project leaders, parents, and extension staff. So we're really trying to make this judging experience a learning experience. So the judge is the link between the 4-H project, the 4-H member, and that standard of performance. And again, Karen will be covering those standards in the next 2 weeks. The role of the judge is to be fair, firm, friendly, and consistent. So consistency is key. Again, we're going to focus on youth. That positive youth development is the purpose of 4-H project work. And we're judging the exhibit, not the child. So they're bringing that food item, whether it be a cake, whether it be cinnamon rolls, you're judging the exhibit. And we judge the exhibit as an illustration of the 4-H members' achievements towards project goals and objectives. So Beth, we'll turn it back over to you.
All right. So prior to judging day, you really need to take some time to prepare yourself as a judge. So before the judging day, you're going to want to know exactly what you're evaluating. So my suggestion is go back to that letter and make sure you know exactly what divisions that you'll be looking at that fair. Locate the judging site, plan the travel time that it's going to take. What's it say about parking? You know, depending on what you are judging, sometimes it's not always at the fairgrounds. Sometimes it's at another location, and sometimes it's even prior to the fair. So it's really important that you key in on when and where you need to be somewhere. Prepare whatever tools that you're going to need to judge. And, you know, that all depends on what it is that you're judging. You are also going to want to review the standards or the scorecards that will be used. And hopefully those were provided to you ahead of time so that you have time to review them. You're going to want to read the fair book, and that's not only just the section that you're judging, but also, you know, what do the general rules and the division rules both say. You want to think back through and review the 4-H Danish ribbon system, and remind yourself of what is a white, a red, and a blue, and we will go over those a little more in detail later. Once you're actually at the fair, you're going to want to clarify a few things with the superintendents. What are the ribbons that you'll be handing out, and how does that work? Are you going to give the ribbons to the young person as they get their item judged? Are you going to be attaching it to the exhibit? Will you be awarding them later? How does it work at the fair that you're at? What other kinds of awards are going to be awarded in this division? You'll also want to know about break times. You know, so many of our county fairs happen when it's like 100 degrees, and there's not always air conditioning where we are. So that's important to know, you know, when can you take a break? And then you're going to also want to double check on the payment process. What type of paperwork are you going to fill out for them before you leave for the day? Some fairs actually have you go to the fair office and get your check before you leave because they don't want to mail it. Other fairs have a longer process where they'll actually mail that to you. But you're going to want to check all of that with that superintendent once you arrive at the fair. So the next thing that you're going to want to think through are judging standards. And so what are the standards? Ideally, standards are derived from research, primarily from land-grant universities, and they are the same standards that are used by adults. So if we are judging chocolate chip cookies in the 4-H division, the same standards that we are looking at there are the same standards that we would be looking at in open class as well. Also, the appropriate ribbon should be awarded to the exhibitor based on the evaluation of the exhibit using an accepted standard or scorecard. So the standard or the scorecard really tells us what the ideal exhibit is, and you are comparing the exhibit in front of you to that ideal. And then you're making a ribbon decision based on that. And one other thing that's important, standards should not be changed because of problems or situations which the 4-H'er lives and works. A standard is always the same.
Thank you, Beth. And along with that, Karen Blakesley really works hard to keep those scorecards updated. And at the end of the presentation, we're actually going to go to that website where we'll just take a peek at those, where you can find the different handouts for tonight and also those standards, or what we call scorecards. So now we're going to go really into the judging process. What does that look like? Should you be a judge? So some of the best management practices is that we really encourage that there's this consultative, or what we call conference judging, is where the young person has the ability to discuss their exhibit with you as the judge. that is the best learning environment so that questions can be asked and answered during that time. Also, that you would be working through that scorecard or standard when you're having that conversation with the young person. And then in addition to, saying those verbal comments, we also suggest that there's written things down as well, because sometimes that young person is a little nervous and can't remember everything then, and so they can go back and learn from those comments at the end of that process as well. So what do we suggest? So all the different environments are a little bit differently, but hopefully that 4-H member can sit either beside or across from the judge so that there's easily a way to have that conversation. When I picture county fairs and especially foods judging, there's just lots going on at that time. So hopefully you can provide that opportunity so that the judge and 4-H member can sit either across from each other or sit beside each other. So we suggest as a judge that you introduce yourself and ask the member their name, try to put that 4-H'er at ease, and then again, provide those written comments. And one of the things that what I found is easy is using what we call the sandwich method to provide feedback. And what that looks like then is to start with 2 positives as you start that judging process. Then discuss one way to improve, add another positive, and then end with a 1 or 2 word descriptor which defines the 4-H member's capability. And those of you who have had experience judging knows that when you've judged probably 50 kids or 60 kids, it is hard to remember what you've said. So having this kind of in your mind is a good way to work through that process. So what are some suggested positive comments? So here's some verbiage that you could use. I like how. I can tell you enjoyed this because. You handled such and such very well. I can tell you learned a new skill by how you should feel proud because you did a great job of following the project standards by. And then it's important to have constructive comments as well. Many times we hear from 4-H members it's like, well, they didn't understand the ribbon placing because there wasn't any comments about what they could do to improve. So the constructive comments could be, the next time you might try some other ideas to try. It would be helpful if, it may be helpful to practice before you make or bake this again. And as you work on this, an important thing to remember is, so that learning, again, that opportunity, how do I improve? What can I do better for next time? So here are some suggestion questions to ask. Tell me about how you selected this particular exhibit to compete this year for the fair. It's always interesting to see where they got that recipe, whether it maybe was their grandmother's or somebody in the family. What was your favorite part of making this exhibit? What was the most important thing you learned? Again, going back to that key focus that we do in 4-H youth development is making that learning process. And then if you had the chance to do this again, what would you do differently? Back to the experiential learning model of do, reflect, and then apply. So they've made it once, reflect on it, what would they apply next time? What was the most difficult part of baking this item? And how will you use what you learned next time? So even asking them, maybe some of those suggestions that you've made, what would they do next time to improve? And ask them how you've shared what you learned with others. So what is the parent's role in the judging process? So basically just remember that the judging conversation is between you as the judge and the 4-H member. So find a way for parents to be close enough to hear the judging conversation, but they shouldn't try to intervene. This conversation is between you and that 4-H member. And then again, the importance of written comments and markings on that scorecard in case somebody didn't hear what all would be helpful in the future. One of the things too is that asking, letting the 4-H member have a time to ask questions as well is important to have that conversation. Okay, Beth.
So it's going to be important that you award the ribbon that is earned. So we'd like to talk a little bit about the different systems that you might be working within when you judge. First of all, a lot of our 4-H exhibits, especially the static exhibits in our 4-H buildings, are typically awarded on the Danish system. And the Danish system means that all exhibits are going to receive a ribbon. Exhibits are judged in comparison with that ideal standard, not to each other. So the standard that we talked about earlier, that's how we're making a decision in the Danish system as to what the ribbon will be. Exhibits are placed in 4 ribbon groups, and those colors are purple, blue, red, or white. Now, there's also times that you'll see a modified Danish system, and that's often at a livestock show where you will see that. Exhibits are compared to a standard, and they're placed in 4 color ribbon groups, but then they're ranked top to bottom in each ribbon group. So you're going to have a first blue, a second blue, a third blue, a fourth blue, however many blues you have, a first red, a second red, a third red, and so on. So however many there are, they are all ranked. So another system that we see at times is the American system. And that's a lot of times when you're judging an open class. And that is a system where not all exhibits receive a ribbon. Exhibits are ranked 1, 2, 3, etc. Typically 1, 2, 3 is what we see, especially in static exhibits for open class, with a different colored ribbon for each placing. And exhibits are compared to each other. So if you notice in the Danish system, they're compared to the standard. And in the American system, while they're looking at the standard, they're also going to be looking at what is the very best one based on that standard. And it's really important to get these 2 systems in your mind, because there's a number of you that when you judge, you might be asked to judge both open class and 4-H. And so you have to kind of turn that off or turn that on, depending on what it is that you are judging. Now, when we're talking about awarding the right ribbon, most of the ribbons that we see at county fairs are these 4 colors: purple, blue, red, and white. So we're going to start from the top, and then we're going to go back and talk about where to start when you're judging. So when we're talking about a purple ribbon, we mean that that exhibit is outstanding on all standards. There's nothing we can say to improve that item. When we're talking about a blue ribbon quality, we know that that exhibit exceeds the minimum standard and may have a few minor flaws where improvements could be made, but really it's a very well-made item. A red meets all the minimum standards and may have visible signs of needed improvements. And then a white fails to meet minimum standards. Now, a lot of times when people go to judge, they think, well, we're just always starting and thinking about the purple and working down. But the truth is, we start at the red. Everything that comes before us as a judge, we want to think about that item meeting the minimum standard. And then what's going to happen is we're going to take a deeper look at that item, and we're going to decide, did it meet the minimum standard, or did it fail to? And then we'll move down to the white ribbon. Or if it exceeded the minimum standard, then we can move up to the blue or up to the purple. So that's a really important piece to keep in mind as a judge, is that when you're judging, you're always going to start with that red ribbon. Everything comes to you and you're assuming it's a red, and then you're going to move up or move down depending on the quality compared to the standard. Now, there are some classes and some fairs that will have classes that have another ribbon, and that's called a participation ribbon. So that is not one of the blue, red, or white or purple ribbons. Participation ribbons are awarded to those exhibits that do not meet the requirements. Participation ribbons indicate to the 4-H'er that the exhibit was not necessarily poor in quality, only that it did not meet the project requirements as indicated in the fair book. So they get a participation ribbon for taking part, but they really didn't meet what the standards were. There are other classes at county fairs that are just participation classes. So, you know, it's an opportunity for somebody to come and exhibit something, but it's not going to be judged against a standard. And one of the examples would be our Cloverbud projects at our county fairs. Those are participation only classes. One of the things that you will want to really get clear with your superintendents is what kind of champions are going to be awarded at this fair. And if you look here, we've got a list of some of the things that you might be asked to look for. Reserve champion is awarded to the second highest quality exhibit in a single division if there is a worthy exhibit. Champion is awarded to the highest quality exhibit in a single division if there is a worthy exhibit. And then if you move on here, reserve grand champion is awarded to the second highest quality exhibit in one project area if the quality merits the award, and grand champion is awarded to the highest quality exhibit in the project area, again, if the quality merits this award. So when we're kind of thinking about what this looks like, you know, maybe we're talking about the foods project overall, but maybe a division is going to be 9 to 11-year-olds or 12 to 14-year-olds. And so maybe they have reserve champions in those divisions, but then it's a grand champion or a reserve grand champion for the overall project that you would select from those. The other thing you'll want to be aware of is special awards. Almost every fair has some kind of special awards. So the fair premium book should specify how those exhibits or recipients will be selected. And again, you're going to want to ask the superintendents for guidance on that. And you want to make sure that the exhibit quality should merit that award.
So Beth, I just want to have a little discussion here on some ribbons. One of the things we have seen over the years, and I've been around Extension for quite a while, and so one of the things we've kind of seen is an inflation of the ribbons, and so that's why we really talk about the ribbon that's earned and what are the expectation there. So if it is a purple, you know, it's got to be outstanding in all those standards, and so I think that's really important as a judge, that you kind of think about that as you begin that process of where does that fall. Any comments on that, Beth?
Exactly. And you know, when everybody registered to come to this training, one of the things that we found out about you is if you're foods leaders or parents or food superintendents. And I think it's really important that we help young people accept whatever that ribbon color is, like what Diane said. You know, just because you bring an exhibit to the fair does not mean you're going to walk out of the fair with a purple ribbon. It really does need to merit that. And we need to use it as a learning experience for those young people that we're working with to help them understand how they actually could have improved.
Okay, thank you.
Diane, can I go back to the white ribbon for just a minute as well?
Yes.
A lot of times people feel really weird about giving a white ribbon because it's the lowest ribbon. But a white ribbon does not mean that it's not a worthy exhibit. You know, it was something that somebody tried, it didn't work, it flopped, there's ways to improve it. A white ribbon it signals to us that there is something that we can improve and something that we can learn and apply and do better next time. But it was still an important exhibit to bring and to learn with.
And I think, especially with the foods projects, we do see more white ribbons or disqualified because they didn't meet those standards with food safety purposes. So Karen, would you mind speaking to that just a little bit if you could? If you could turn on your video for us.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I hope you can see or hear me. Yeah, sometimes we do give white ribbons because of a food safety reason. And this is something that I will go through in the next 2 weeks about that. You know, we oftentimes, especially at the state fair, it seems, we get products in that are not done. They just haven't been baked completely and they look raw in the middle. Other issues could be because the type of product that it is, it really should be a product that's refrigerated. And there are some reasons that we do not want to bring those kinds of things to the fair. So I'll go into a whole lot more detail in the next 2 weeks about those types of things. But hopefully that gives you an idea of where a white would be appropriate to give.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and take the questions. And Beth, if I'll unmute your mic just in case so we'll share if there's questions. And then what I'll do, go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, sorry. I was going to start asking your question, telling you your questions. So the very first one is, so will each fair have a different system for placing?
I don't know that I'd necessarily call it a different system for placing. It depends on what you're judging. I think most of the fairs that I have ever been to have used the Danish system for 4-H and have used the American system for open class. So I would say typically that system difference would be between those two types of exhibits. Diane, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Right, I agree. Most of the time it is that Danish system. What you will see in differences is that some fairs will have class champions that look a little different. Then those class champions feed into, you know, the grand champion overall. So that's where you're going to see a little bit difference. There also that some fairs have what they have call a state fair blue, where in some other counties that's a purple. So that's just, you know, it's probably the same type, to me a purple and the state fair blue, but you'll need to just know that designation. So as Beth was describing the ribbon ratings here, so with the Danish system, you know, they are, you know, compared to that standard, but then once it moves into trying to choose that class champion or the grand champion, you know, they are comparing to one another.
And I would say one difference between fairs also would be probably when they start looking at those champions. Some do those by age. Some do those by, we're going to have a champion cake. We're going to have a champion cookie. And so those are different, and that would depend on how the fair has done it. There have been a couple of fairs that I've gone to as well where there are certain divisions at their fair that do not have a champion, do not have reserve champions, you know, don't have champions. So again, those would be all things to clarify at that local fair with that superintendent.
Okay. The next question, can you help me understand the difference between awarding a participation ribbon and a white ribbon?
Can we go back to that slide, Diane? Okay, so participation ribbons, as we said, they might be awarded to somebody whose project does not meet the requirement. I've worked with fiber arts at the state fair for several years, and every once in a while we will have things come into fiber arts like you cannot have a wood reed basket. That is, I mean, it's very clear in the rules, no wood reed baskets. So when a wood reed basket comes in, we give that a participation ribbon and we put it in the back room, and we don't display it at the state fair because, you know, it's an exhibit that came from a county fair, but it is not going to be exhibited because it doesn't meet our standard of what that class was all about. Now, when we go back up to the white ribbon, let's say somebody, you know, brings something that certainly does mean it, like some kind of cross stitch in their fiber art project, and there's all kinds of issues. There's stains on it, they've not clipped the threads close, they've actually missed some stitches, or there's a bunch of tension issues. That's where we're going to see probably a white ribbon because they didn't meet that minimum standard.
And as Karen talked about, a lot of our foods, especially the state fair, because I work with Karen at the state fair on those, is because they're not done. And so that's going to, you know, we don't disqualify that, but it's a white ribbon because it just didn't meet that standard of food safety of even being done all the way through. Hope that clarified for the person asking.
Okay. What would the special awards be like the decorated cakes in Kearney County?
In some cases, decorated cakes are their own division. So we do not have decorated cakes at the state fair because we do not have room to display them. But that would be something to me that's probably just like it would be another class. Those specialty awards, as we were kind of describing, would probably be, maybe there's somebody who wanted to do the best loaf of bread. That would be a specialty award. Or maybe the best pie. So they would maybe get some different award for that.
And my experience at the Kansas State Fair is that we have several special awards in the fiber arts division. And, you know, one of them is for the best woven object. There's another one, I think, that's for the best spool of yarn that somebody has made. And those are, you know, outside donors who want to do a special award just for that little part of the project because that's something that they are interested in.
All right. Do all fairs use the scorecards for each project exhibited?
We certainly encourage that because of the piece that, so that people know what that looks like, and that if written comments are needed, that's a part of that. If your fair does not have them, I would just have a conversation with that superintendent and say maybe how helpful scorecards are to the learning process.
Yeah, if we go back to what Diane said in the very beginning, this is about a learning process. And really, without that scorecard for that young person to look back on and to reflect on, it really is hard for them to complete that learning process.
Okay, the next question. Could you speak to having no purple ribbons in a class and selecting a champion? Should the judge raise the placing to a purple to award a champion because there is an award to be given?
You know, it seems to me that fairs have lots of different ways that they take care of these things. Through my 4-H career, if it wasn't a purple ribbon, there would not be a champion selected. I know sometimes when they have a trophy that somebody purchased or some special gift, that sometimes they really liked to award those, but that's the system that I grew up with, is if there wasn't a purple, you didn't bump it to a champion. Diane?
I would agree. If it's not the quality, it's again back to what is that ribbon that's earned. But we do know that there's special circumstances that, you know, there was a donor and so something needs to be given. But our suggestion would be that if the quality is not there, that it's not awarded.
And one thing you might consider is working with your donors at local fairs. If they really want to give some kind of a special award like that, maybe you change the wording on that, where the award's not going to be given to the champion of whatever, but it's going to give to the best exhibited cake, or the, you know, and so then you're not changing your standard. It's still the best, even though perhaps it's a blue rather than a purple.
Okay. What is the best way to handle parents who are overbearing during judging?
So we know that there's a lot of work that goes into the, you know, process to get ready for the fair. We know it's usually, as Beth talked about, it's hot. There's usually kind of some sleepless nights or lack of sleep. And so we sure understand maybe that there's some tension there with parents and working with their young people. But as a judge, if you have that situation, I would ask my superintendent to help and just say, you know, or speak to the parent and say, you know, this is a learning opportunity for your young person. I would like to hear their response. And if that doesn't work, you know, then I would call upon my superintendent. And if the superintendent would need help with that, they would call upon the extension agent. Beth, what are your thoughts?
And one other thought I have, just have the situation physically set up where there's a place for the parent maybe to stand further away. And yes, if it becomes a problem, then you're actually, you know, going to have to call somebody else in to help with that.
But I would hope that just explaining that it's a learning process for the young person, that you would like to hear from them.
So another question is, what do I need to bring with me for judging? And she says she imagines it'll be covered later, but she just wanted to know what you guys thought for this general session.
And Karen will cover that next week, because there are many tools that you will need as a foods judge, and the county fair expects you to bring those tools. So tune in next week and Karen will cover that.
And just in general, I think it's always important, once you read through the rules on something, because, you know, I know many of you, foods won't be the only thing that you judge. But if you're looking through some division and you know, the posters have to be a certain size, well, then that means somebody probably is going to need to bring a tape measure, you know, to make sure that you can measure those things and make sure that they fit. So again, that may be something that is provided as part of the fair, but it also might be something that you as a judge should just bring along and be ready to use. So I think it's always important to read the book and be thinking about what are all the tools that I'm going to need to make these decisions. And like they said, Karen will cover in detail what you would need for foods next week.
Okay. What do you do if you as a judge have a food allergy?
Karen, I'm going to ask you to answer that, please.
You want me to step in here?
Yes, please.
Yes. Well, that is something to be very aware of. It actually, in some cases, I would say it depends on what kind of food allergy do you have. Obviously, if you have a wheat allergy, you're probably not going to want to be tasting food because pretty much everything that is entered in the foods class is going to have a wheat product in it, almost everything. So it really depends on what your food allergy is. Now, if it's a random thing, I know, for example, like I know some people are allergic to strawberries, for example. So
I think we just lost Karen.
Oh no.
We'll see when she comes back to finish that.
Okay. Do state fair exhibits have to be a purple at the county fair, or can it be a blue?
Beth, you want to go ahead?
You need to read what the state fair book says. I think some of them, I think it can be a state fair blue or a
sorry,
purple. Diane, do you know in foods
are
what
you
yours
there?
says?
Yes, Karen, go ahead.
Hello?
Can you hear us, Karen?
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
My internet's really unstable today. So just to recap, really be aware of that. Read the recipe. Make sure you understand what's in that recipe. Just remember, there's always the chance of cross-contamination too. So, you know, if you're really concerned about it, and it is something to be concerned about, you may want to opt out of being a foods judge. I hate to say that because we really need judges. So discuss that with the agent too, and maybe it can work something out. Maybe you would be better to judge something like gift baskets or nutritional exhibits like posters or even food preservation. So.
Thank you, Karen. So back to the question about what ribbon can move on to the state fair. So I do believe it has to be a blue or better. And so again, that's back to some people have state fair blues or some people have purples.
Okay. All right. What are the qualifications to be a foods judge?
So the qualifications to be a foods judge is to attend a training like this. And so we do want you to be knowledgeable, not only on the ribbon process that we're talking about tonight and the conference judging and to know those helpful hints, but then to also know the specifics on foods judging and then foods preservation. That's the important key. So if you feel then comfortable, I think the best learning process, if you've never judged before, maybe volunteer at your local county fair and sit and be a clerk with a judge so that you can see all types of products and how they work that process. If you want to volunteer at the state fair, we would love to have you there as well. We usually start the process at 9:45 and we're still judging at 5. So it's a helpful process to just learn from someone else and then be that qualified judge. So this is to be able to take training is the important key piece.
Okay. What happens if an exhibitor forgets their entry card?
Well, I would hope if the exhibitor forgets that entry card that there's a spare one there at the county fair so that they can complete it. Jennifer, what would happen at your county fair if someone forgot theirs?
We typically have backups or blank cards. Sometimes like we print duplicates so that there's something, right there for them. But we do have blank ones that they can easily fill out as well.
And at State Fair, those are printed ahead of time so they're added there, but we have the process that we could go get another one printed as well.
Okay. So we've covered parents quite a bit, but at what point do we ask an overbearing parent to step away?
I think that depends on the situation. Again, what I'm suggesting is that the judge, and then there's going to be the superintendent right there, but to say this is a learning opportunity, please let your child answer so that we can have this be as educational as we can. If that person, I mean, and it's kind of always, based on what the specific situation is, but do know that if intervention needs to happen from that superintendent or from an extension agent, the thing that we also need to remember with people is that, this is one person's opinion on any given day. And that's the process. You with your child has brought this item to be judged and asked for this opinion. And that's an important part of the conversation as well.
Okay.
Beth, anything to add?
Oh, no, that's good. But I did want to circle back around to the question about what exhibits go to the state fair. I did look up the Kansas State Fair book, and so I thought it might just be helpful to read to everybody what that says. Only Purple Award or State Fair Blue exhibits selected in a previously designated competition may be exhibited in the 4-H division. All contestants must have qualified through county, district, or other competitive events approved by the local K-State Research and Extension Office. Beef, sheep, swine, meat, goat, rabbit entries must be of blue quality. So there's just a little bit of difference there, but for the foods or other items in 4-H Centennial Hall, Purple Award or State Fair Blue.
Thank you, Beth. It's that State Fair Blue purple / again, because there's some different designations there. So thank you, Beth.
Do all states use the same standards for judging? Also, if we complete this series, will we be able to judge in all states?
So basically, this same information that Beth and I are sharing is pretty much the same across, to me, would be from different states. Now, to me, and I'm going to let Karen jump in here as well, because those food standards are pretty typical. But Karen, what would you say there?
Yeah, I would agree. As far as I know, I think the standards would be very similar across the states. It's just that other states might have different classes, different categories of food items. And so there might be some different special awards and things like that. But I think in general, I think it's a pretty standard way to look at different products across different states, as far as I know.
One thing that I will say is when you get to different states, though, they may not always exhibit the same kinds of things that we do. We are going to see a lot of food at our state fair, but there are some state fairs that you would go to in the 4-H division, and maybe what's mainly there are posters about food or exhibits, more educational exhibits than actual foods exhibits. So if you were looking at judging at other states, you definitely want to know what kind of exhibits they expect to be at their fair, because it may look a little different than what you're used to.
Okay, one final question. Does this training help with being a judge in any other category?
I would say this first portion, very much so, because it's the same for judging other categories, whether it be geology, whether it be fiber arts, as Beth has worked with the fiber arts and the clothing. So these basic principles tonight will be helpful for you to judge in other areas as well.
Okay, there's another one that popped up. How do you volunteer to help at the state fair?
So how you help is that we, from the state office, send out a notice to the extension offices, and there's a sign-up place that you can put your name in, or the extension agent. And Jennifer, I'll let you decipher how you do that in your local unit so you can help us. but then you would mark, I want to be a foods judge clerk. And if, I think that we will add that question to our end of the series evaluation piece that we're going to do, so that we would know if you would want to help at the state fair, because we need lots of help to judge over 1,500 items at the state.
Yeah, and at the county level, we usually, if you're interested in doing that, we just express it to us, and then we're able to get you into the system. So it just takes a phone call to your local office.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome. Will you be having arts and crafts trainings at all?
You know, that's a good question. At this point, we don't have anything else scheduled, because I think we really want to see how this goes first. You know, our first choice in the past has always been to do trainings live. And so this year that didn't work out for us. So we're trying something new and different. Some things probably lend themselves more to live training than online training, but I think we'll be looking at it afterward to make some of those decisions about what else we might be able to offer.
Okay. Let's see. How will county fairs know that we have completed the training and are willing to judge?
Again, at the end of the series, we're going to have a little survey, Qualtrics survey, like you used when you registered, and we will ask you if you do want to serve as a judge, and then we will share that with all local extension staff, so they will have names.
Awesome. Okay. Last question. Is there still a statewide county fair list of what you're willing to judge, or how do you get added onto that list or update your judging list?
We try to keep that as updated as possible. It's very difficult, and we've been trying to find a different platform with that. So I would suggest, if you feel like you've kind of fallen off of a list, that you check with your local extension agent, and they can feed that into We as Specialists to share that.
Okay. It looks like that's all the questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much. What I'm going to do is take a minute to share this website that Karen has put together. And the link was where you actually registered at, well, I think so. But on it is the Zoom tips. And then from tonight, you had this introduction to judging, and that was a copy of our PowerPoint slides. And then there was also, there's this handout that basically covers the same information, kind of in just a, you know, 2-page little format, that we focus on youth, what are those standards, describes the ribbon rating systems, talks about that consultative judging with the sandwich method. And so once tonight is over, we will be having the recorded session uploaded here so that you can come back and listen to that. And then as we move through the training sessions, next week will be on foods and nutrition. Karen will put these, the copy of the PowerPoint slides if you like to take notes on it. And then here's her handouts. And then for session 3 on April 30th for foods preservation.
Okay.
Any other questions, Jennifer?
Nope, that's all. A lot of thank yous.
So I would like to thank Jennifer and Crystal, Jennifer in the Southwind District and Crystal in Johnson County, for their efforts, because as Beth said, we were going to do face-to-face trainings, and once the pandemic hit, we thought, let's try this and do it online. So Karen Blakesley is our content specialist, and Beth and I as 4-H Youth Development Specialist, and then our local faculty of Jennifer and Crystal. And then Linda, who retired from the Cottonwood District, has also been a big help to us. So we look forward to seeing you next week, Thursday night at 7 o'clock. And Karen will be our lead talking about foods judging.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good evening.